Hey there guys, it's Tina and I'm back. And I have some more Fude fun for you guys. So for those of you who don't know, Fude in Japanese means brush, and it usually refers to calligraphy style brushes. But Fude has now evolved in the makeup community to become synonymous with Japanese handmade makeup brushes. And I have dived headfirst into Fude. I am Fude'd up to hair, okay? I have so many brushes, so many different hair types. I've been doing my research, I've been gathering all the information, and I figured why not go ahead and share what I have learned with you guys. And I don't know, like make it a little bit more accessible for those of you who are interested in tipping your toe into the Fude world. Maybe you are just a beginner in makeup brushes and you're not quite sure which ones to pick up. Maybe you are a novice but you still want some more information, some more details. Not to fret, I am here as your fellow Fude lover to share what I have learned along the way. So in this video, I'm gonna share with you brush shapes and brush sizes, and that's something that's gonna be a deciding factor in which brushes you pick up, like which brushes you end up enjoying. And I am here to break it down for you to the nitty gritty bare bones so you can fully understand the anatomy of a brush, the size of brush heads, the length of bristles, and all of that. So if you want to hear a detailed breakdown of brush shapes and sizes, then stay tuned and I will talk to you soon. So we'll start out with the anatomy of a makeup brush. The overall construction of a makeup brush will help to determine the functionality, performance, and comfort or ease of use of each of our brushes. So it's good to understand just how a makeup brush is constructed to determine which ones are best suited for our needs. So a makeup brush is constructed of three main parts. We have the handle, where you will be holding the brush. We have the ferrule, which is the center part of the brush, and this joins the handle to the head of the brush, which is the third part of the brush. And these three parts come together to give you the overall shape and size of your makeup brushes. So the brush handle is the part of the brush that you will typically hold in your hand, and it is usually made of wood, which is coated in varnish or paint, and optionally it will have the brush manufacturer name and the name of the brush or a number associated with the style of the brush. Some brushes may have metal handles or even resin or plastic handles, but wood is the usual material that you will see for brush handles. The handles of your brush are usually round in shape or cylindrical to work best in the hands. So you will typically hold a brush the way you would hold a writing implement, so a pen or a pencil. So between your fingers, a round or cylindrical shape is much more comfortable. And the base of your brush handles can vary. They can be more rounded as we see here. They can have a more flat edge as we see here. They can even be completely flat on the end and wider so they can actually be stored upright on their own without having to put them in a brush holder. Or they can get fancy and give you a slanted colored edge, which is really beautiful, but this is not going to add to the functionality of the brush itself. And brushes will vary in handle length and taper. So here we have a longer brush handle with a more intense taper to the tip. Here is another example of a tapered handle. You also have brush handles that are a single width all the way up and down. You may have a brush handle with a little bit of a curve to give you a more ergonomic and comfortable fit in the hands. And you even have brushes that will take the guesswork out of how to hold your brushes. This brush, for instance, has curved indentation that allows your fingers to fit perfectly around the handle of the brush. And they even have indentations at the end of the brush in case you hold your brushes a little bit further towards the end of the handle. My preference for the thickness of my brush handles depend on the function of the brush itself. So for my face brushes, for instance, I prefer a medium thick handle because it gives me more control over the brush. Since the brush is a little bit larger, I want to ensure that I have a good grip on the brush. So a wider handle will help me with that. And some of my face brushes have a much wider handle, and what I find is that I'm able to get a more diffused look with a wider handle because I don't have as much control because my grip is not as tight on the brush. So I'm able to get a lighter touch on my skin, which is gonna give me a more diffused look to my face products. For my eye brushes, I prefer a much thinner handle because again, I need to have more control. So the thinner the handle, the easier it is to hold in my hand and work in very precise movements around my eye area, because of course we want more precision and control in such a small area around the eyes. And I realized that preference because I'd gotten these brushes from Sonia G. This was her first release, which has very thick handles, and I don't like how these feel in my hands. I prefer the tapered handles that she has in the Pro line. So I stay away from thick handle eye brushes, and for my eye brushes I prefer that they have a longer handle because for precision work I will hold further up towards the ferrule, and then if I want a lighter touch I will hold towards the base of the brush. So the longer handles allows me a little bit more versatility. But with a face brush I am not as concerned with the length of the handle. I can work with shorter handles or longer handles. In fact, I prefer a medium length handle. Some face brushes can have really long handles. For instance, my Scott Barnes brushes have really long handles, and these brushes I think have a longer handle because they are meant for professional makeup artists that tend to hold their brushes a little bit further along the ferrule because they have to be a little bit more light-handed when they're working on other people, because they're not applying the product to their face, so they can't gauge the amount of pressure that they're applying, and the further down the handle that the brush is held, the lighter the pressure will be. So for professionals it is ideal to have longer handles on their brushes, but for me, for personal use, it doesn't really matter when it comes to face brushes. In fact, a shorter handle on a foundation brush is probably more ideal because I am never going to hold the handle all the way to the end. I am going to hold it close to the ferrule so I can get that buff-in, blend-in motion from this type of brush. The ferrule is the center part of the brush and it is the securement piece. Ferrules are usually made from corrosion protected metal, so think aluminum or nickel plated brass. Sometimes you may see plastic used, but that is not widely used as plastic is a little bit more fragile and a little bit more brittle, and you need the ferrule of your brush to be extremely strong. The ferrule is filled with glue on both ends to secure the handle of the brush and also the head of the brush. The ferrule may also be crimped for further securement. As you can see here, there's crimping at the handle of the brush and the ferrule to hold that ferrule in place. You can also have crimping at the head of the brush. The ferrule of your brush will also be cylindrical or conical in shape, and the open end where it meets the bristles will be a circular shape, or it will be slightly pinched to give you an oval shape or a flat paddle style shape. Then you have the head of the brush or the bristles, which is the action end of the brush. This is the part of the brush that's going to do the work. So you're going to use the bristles to pick up product and apply it to your skin, and you'll also use it to blend and buff and swipe color onto your lids or onto your face. The head or the bristles of the brush may be synthetic or natural hairs, and there are various options on the market for natural hair as well as synthetic options. And as I mentioned before, the ferrule shape will also help determine the final shape of the head of the brush. But the bristle type and the length of the bristles, along with the density and how the bristles are bundled, will help to dictate the final shape of the brush head, and it will also dictate the function of the brush and the suitability for various product types. And now that you have all that information, let's go ahead and talk about the different shapes of brush heads and how they factor into functionality and performance. So there are two overall ways to view a brush shape. We have the profile or side view, which is exactly what it means, looking at the brush from the side. And you can also look at the brush shape from the top of the brush. And both of these views are gonna give you an idea of the functionality again and the performance of a brush head. So the first shape is pretty straightforward. It's pretty self-explanatory. That is a round shape, and that means the ferrule of the brush is completely round. It is not pinched or curved. It is a complete spherical shape, and that will result in a completely round shape to the brush head. So you'll see that from the top, the brush has a circular shape. Here is another round shaped brush. So you'll see that the ferrule is again completely round. In this case, the ferrule has a little bit of a lip. So there is a bit of a curve where it meets the bristles. I love seeing that feature on a brush. I don't know why. It just gives it a more luxurious feel and look. But because the ferrule is completely round, again, the head of the brush is also going to be completely round. The next shape is the round flat shape. The description that is widely used for brush shapes is round or round flat. Round flat refers to this particular shape, which is a pinched ferrule. So the rounded ferrule has been crimped slightly to give a more flat rounded shape to the brush. So there'll be two definitive sides to the brush, which are on the flat sides, and then you will have the rounded sides as well. This is gonna give a more oval profile to the brush. So from the top you will see that the brush is no longer circular, it is definitely more oval shaped, and you can see the difference in shape here. This is completely round and this is more oval shape. Here is another example of a round flat shape. So this ferrule isn't necessarily pinched, but it is more oval in shape to give a more oval shape to the head of the brush. So you'll see there are two flatter sides and then two rounded sides to give you that round flat shape. Now the round flat shape is also used to describe flat brushes that are a little bit more pinched or tighter packed. So they're not gonna give you a wide or full brush head because the pinch at the ferrule of the brush is a little bit tighter to give you a tighter, flatter shape to your brush, and it ends up looking almost like a paddle style brush, and that also has to do with the bundling of the brush and the density of the bristles that are used. Here we have another round flat brush with a tighter ferrule, so the ferrule is a little bit more pinched, and this gives us a flat paddle style brush, and there are not many bristles in this brush, so it's not going to give us a really full brush head. So now that we've spoken about the basic shape of a brush, whether it has a rounded or round flat ferrule, let's now dive a little bit deeper into specific brush shapes and what they're best used for. So let's start out with the different types of round brushes. So here we have a round brush with a domed top. So here you'll see that the top view of the brush gives us a very round shape because the ferrule is round, but also from the side we have a domed top. So it has a circular curve to the tops of the bristles. There is a slight taper to the outer bristles of the brush. And tapering means we'll have shorter bristles on the outer perimeter of the brush. And as we go into the center of the brush, the bristles get a little bit longer. However, for a dome shape, the taper is very slight. So most of the bristles are the same length, and they will have a slight taper to them to give them that slight curve to the shape of the brush. Round brushes with a dome shape are perfect for blending and buffing out product. So it is ideal for face brushes that you use for foundation, pressed and loose powder, bronzer, blush, and highlight. And you will also see this brush shape in a lot of eye blending brushes because they are perfect for blending out and buffing out color because of the round domed shape. So we have shorter bristles on the end that are going to help to diffuse color as you work the product around on your skin. The outer bristles will splay and help to diffuse the edges of the color, while the center of the brush is used to buff and blend. Here is another round top brush. This one is a little bit different because the bristles are a little bit more tapered. So we have shorter bristles on the outer edge, as you can see, and then it gradually moves towards longer bristles in the center. So the rounded top is a little bit smaller. It doesn't come all the way out as we saw with the previous round top brush. So you see the taper of your bristles will help to determine the shape of the brush. These are both circular, rounded, dome-shaped brushes, but you see this one has a little bit more taper to the bristles on the edge. This is a great brush for a multitude of purposes because of the size, because of the tapering, because of the dome shape. This can be used for face powder, bronzer, blush, highlight, the works, because it has that beautiful round shape, but it has a smaller head that's gonna give you more precision work. And I love the taper to these bristles because this is gonna actually diffuse color a lot more than a completely dome-shaped brush. Next we have what I call an oval shape. So the ferrule is slightly pinned, so this is a round flat ferrule, and it's gonna give us more of an oval shape to our brush, but it still has a domed top. So the bristles are slightly tapered towards the center to give you a curve that's gonna be great for blending and buffing out color. With this style of brush, a denser brush is gonna give you a more flared shape. So you'll see here that the bristles kind of flare out to give you more width to the brush head, and this is perfect again for blending and buffing color out. You can use it the same way you would a completely round and dome shaped brush, but this is gonna give you a little bit more precision. So it has a tighter shape to it, so you can use it to chisel out the face, you can use it for contour, bronzer, blush. This is going to give you a more precise application rather than an overall round shape brush. Then we have the smaller round flat brushes, which come to almost a paddle style shape because they are smaller and less dense. So you'll see next to the round flat fluffy brush, we have a lot less surface area. And you can even see with this taper, it's a little bit more severe. And it's not necessarily that the shape is completely different. It's just that the bigger brush has more bristles, so it's gonna give you more volume at the top of the brush, while the thinner, smaller brush is gonna seem a little bit more tapered because there are less bristles towards the center of the brush. These kinds of brushes are perfect for applying precise color on the face. So these are used for blush or highlight or even contour color because they still have that dome shape at the top and they have the tapered bristles on the side that are gonna help to diffuse color, but they're smaller and they'll give you a more precise application of color. And you can also blend and buff in a more concentrated way rather than a round top brush would do, which would just get color everywhere. So if you're going for precision work, I recommend this kind of shape for blush and highlighter. Now, how about a flat top brush? These brushes still have a round or round flat ferrule. This one has a round ferrule, but the top of the bristles is completely flat, which means there's minimal tapering to the bundling of these bristles. So there are still shorter bristles throughout, but they are not as tapered as a dome-shaped brush. This one has a completely flat shape, which is perfect for applying foundation products, cream products, because it gives you a lot of buffing space. So I use this brush for foundation or concealer. As you can see, the entire top surface of the brush would be used for that buffing and blending motion. And because of the shape of this one, I can also use it for precision work. If I want to apply, say, cream blush, this would be also ideal. A flat top brush is not going to be as versatile as a round or dome shaped brush. Since it has that flat top, it limits how you can use this brush and it limits the functionality. So you won't see a ton of these styles on the market, but having one of these in your arsenal is still great for precision work and for foundation or concealer. Then we have the angled brush. This one typically has a round flat ferrule, so it is going to be slightly pinched, but the head of the brush is angled. So there'll be shorter bristles on one side of the brush and longer bristles on the other side, and they will taper in a curved shape to give you an angle to your brush. And because of the density of the bristles, this particular brush, you can see it flares out to give you a nice fullness to the head of the brush. An angled brush is great for precision work again. I use these types of brushes for bronzer or contour. Because of the angled shape to the brush, you can apply your product directly on one side of the brush and then use the rest of the brush to diffuse and blend the edges of the product. And you have various sizes of angled brushes. This is a smaller angled brush, but you'll see that it still has that beautiful bloom to the head of the brush, which gives it a fluffy shape. These brushes are perfect for precision work, contouring, and bronzing. The next style of brush is the pointed, tapered, or candle shape brush. I don't have a lot of brushes in my collection that have this shape because it is not my preferred shape of brush. So when you see candle, don't think of an actual candle, think of the flame that it creates. The flame typically has a tight base, it has a wider center, and then it tapers to a point at the top. And that is exactly the shape that these brushes mimic. So they'll typically have a round ferrule base, and then the bristles are bundled so that there is a sharp taper to them and they come to a point. So there are less bristles at the center of the brush, which gives it a sharper, more pointed shape to the brush. This is not my ideal shape of brush. A lot of the brushes that I have that are actually described as a pointed or tapered brush actually end up fluffing out and rounding out as they're washed, which I love because I don't want to have a point to my brushes because a point is going to create a harsh line. The beauty of tapered bristles is that you use them to buff out and blend out and diffuse the edge of color, with the point that can create harshness that I don't appreciate. So my brushes ended up having a more rounded center rather than a point, which works perfectly for me. But for pointed brushes, they actually work great under the eyes, so you can get right up against your lash line because that tip is a little bit longer than the edges of the brush, and that allows for precision work. They are great for contouring again because of that point. You can get right into the hollows of your cheeks and use the edges to diffuse out the color. So if you're into really precise work, if you like a sharper contour, a tapered or pointed brush would work in your favor. It's just not my ideal brush, and I only use them for powdering under my eyes because they have that pointed shape that can fit directly in the concaves of my eyes. They also work well to contour the nose, so if you wanted a smaller, more precise brush, this is the shape to go for. Then you have my least favorite shape of brush, which is a fan brush, and I am very limited in the fan brushes I have. In fact, I think this is one of the only ones I have to use as reference. So a fan shaped brush is designed to mimic a Japanese fan, and they'll vary in thickness and width of the bristles. You can have fan brushes that are very skinny. I'll insert one here so you can see what I mean. This brush has very thin bristles, they're very sparse, sparse, and that kind of brush is ideal for applying a very light wash of color on the cheek. So you can use it for a highlight, you can use it to highlight the cupid's bow or the bridge of the nose. It would allow you to get a very sheer color payoff. Another use of these fan brushes is for precision work again. So a lot of people will use these fan brushes, the thicker versions with more density and volume to the bristles, for contouring or even for blush or bronzer. So that functionality will be determined by the thickness of the head of the brush. So for instance, this one, even though it's thin, it still has a little bit of fluffiness to it, so you can use it to really chisel out the cheek, but then you can still use it to diffuse the contour. Here is a larger version. This one has more of a dome shape, and you'll see that this one is very wide at the top. So this one actually works really well for contour or bronzer. But this is not my favorite shape. Again, I think it's very limited in its functionality. You can only use it for precise work. So I tend to stay away from these types of brushes. And we can't talk about face brushes without talking about a Kabuki brush. This is a very specific style and shape of brush. A Kabuki brush has a very short, wide, and stubby handle, and it is typically used for powder application. So whether that is loose or pressed powder, you can also use it for bronzer. Any all over face application would be ideal for this type of brush. It is also great for finishing powder. So these handles, again, very short and stubby, but the head of the bristle can be various shapes. They tend to have a round dome shape, but they can also have a flat top or even a flat curved angled top. So the tops of the bristles can vary, but the overall shape of the brush is dictated by that very short and stubby handle. Here is a style of brush that I wanted to kind of separate from the pack. These have shorter handles, but they are not a Kabuki style handle. They are longer than a Kabuki, but they're still shorter than an average makeup brush, especially one that's used for the face. I find these brushes ideal for foundation or setting powder or just all over color because of the shape of the heads of the brush, which is round and domed, but also because of the length and shape of the handle. So these brushes, again, short handles, but they fit in your hands a little bit differently. Because the handle is so short, the brush is able to fit perfectly into your hand, where the base of the brush will line up with the base of your finger and fit almost in the palm of your hands. So this allows you a lot more control and a lot more power behind the brush, because you are now using not just your fingers and the grip of your fingers, but you're also using the power of your palm to blend and buff and move product around. So I love this type of brush for foundation and powder. Now, the shapes we just discussed were mainly for face brushes, but that also rolls into eye brushes as well. Remember when I said the round shape is the best shape for a blending brush? Here you have a perfect example of an eye blending brush with a round ferrule and a dome top. This is ideal for blending eyeshadow. You also have the same shape here, but these bristles have a little bit more taper to the edges, so that's gonna be even more ideal for blending because the outer bristles will help to diffuse the edges of color. We also have eyeshadow brushes, which are gonna be that round flat shape ferrule, so they're gonna be more pinched to give it a more flat shape, and they will have a dome top. This is going to be ideal for laying down color because you can use the sides of the brush. So with this brush, you can pick up color on either side because it has two definitive sides, and you can use the top for blending. So this is a very versatile shape of brush. And you'll see that we have different styles of shader brushes, but they have the same overall shape, which is a pinched ferrule and a domed top. But they may be a little bit thicker, as you see here. This one is a little bit thicker, so you can use it for blending out edges as well as laying down color using the sides of the brush. We have a thinner version here which is gonna be more ideal for place and color and for precision work, and you can get very precise lines with the edge of the brush because it is thinner. If you want really precise line work and edges, you can use a flat, very thin version of a shader brush. This kind of brush I use for applying concealer under my brows for a really sharp line because the tip of the brush is very thin, so it gives me a very precise shape to the brush and I can get perfect lines with that edge. Then you have more pencil style brushes which are circular, but they come to a point. This one is a little bit more circular. Remember when I said my pointed brushes, once you wash them, they tend to get a little bit more circular at the top or a little bit more domed, but this is still intended to be a candle style brush or a pointed brush because it should come to a point. But these you can use for precise work again on the inner tear duct or lower lash line, and there are various versions of these as well. They can be thinner, smaller, more pointed, more rounded. This is a beautiful rounded edge one that works great for buffing out color in the crease. Then we have more precise shape brushes. So we have flat top brushes that you can use for your brows or for liner. You have more curved shapes that you can also use for liner or for your brows, or you can use these for your lip lines. So these are great for creating precise lines as you would need for a lip liner brush. And then you have angled style brushes. These are great for eyeliner or for lower lash line work or even for your brows. And the angle for these brushes tend to be pretty sharp, so they're not rounded as with a angled face brush. These tend to be a sharp line that goes from a shorter end to a longer end, and again, this is ideal for liner work. And then you also have eyeliner brushes that are thin and long bristles, and this is actually just a rounded brush with a dome top, but because these brushes are so thin, they're perfect for creating sharp lines. Alright, so now that we've gone through the anatomy of a makeup brush and we've spoken about the brush handles, the ferrule, and the head of the brushes, along with brush head shapes and sizes, let's talk about the overall size of brushes that you will see on different websites. So the brush length that is described on these Fude websites refer to the overall length of the brush from the base of the handle to the very ends of the longest bristles in the brush. The ferrule width refers to the width of the ferrule where it is the widest. So for a round ferrule, it's gonna be the diameter of that circular ferrule, and for an oval shape or a more paddle style shape, which is referred to as round flat, it's gonna give you the length on the widest sides of the ferrule and the shortest sides as well, or it will just refer to the widest part of the brush. So the first brush up we have is the Chikohodo P8 powder brush. This is one of the largest brushes in my collection. The overall length of this brush is 185 millimeters, and that includes the entire length from the end of the handle to the tops of the bristles. The length of these bristles is 63 millimeters. So you'll see that these hairs are extremely long. It's one of the longest bristle lengths you'll find in a gray squirrel brush, and so it is very rare, very limited, and very, very expensive. Then we have the Maki series from Chikuhodo. So we have the Mkko brush with the cart design. This brush has a total length from handle to bristle of 165 millimeters and 52 millimeter bristle length. So you can see the difference between these two brushes. This one being 52 millimeters and this being 63 millimeters. So it's almost 10 millimeters longer, and you can definitely tell the difference when the brushes are next to each other. The brush next to the Mkko is the Mk2 brush, which is also from the Maki series. This is the cherry blossom design. This has the same bristle length and overall length as the Mkko. So you'll see that these two brushes are almost identical. The bristle length is the same, 52 millimeters, and the overall handle length is also identical at 165 millimeters. Next to that, we have the Chikohodo Z9 powder brush. So this is from the Z series, and this has the same length overall and bristle length as the other two next to it from the Maki series. So these three brushes have the same bristle length and handle length, and if you put them up next to each other, you can see that the lengths are definitely the same. However, the Z9 has a round ferrule. We've seen this before, so it's completely round. And the Mkko and the Mk2 have an oval ferrule. So the head of the Z9 will look bigger and fuller than the Mkko and the Mk2 brushes. Then we have another brush from the Maki series from Chikohodo. This one is the Mkum Plum powder brush. This one has a longer overall length than all of these brushes. This one is 167 millimeters, but the bristle length is shorter. It is 47 millimeters. So overall length is longer than the other Maki brushes and the Z9 brush, and you can probably tell that the Mkum brush is just slightly longer. It has a 2 millimeter difference, so it's not going to be much longer, but it's still slightly longer. And then the bristle length is 47 millimeters, which you can see is definitely shorter than the 52 millimeters of the other two brushes. Now I'm going to use the Z series from Chikohodo to show you how the differences in bristle length and brush length can affect the size and shape of a brush. So the first brush we have up is the Z9, which is their powder brush. This one is a round flat ferrule. It has an overall length of 165 millimeters, which is the longest out of all four of these brushes. And it has a bristle length of 52 millimeters. Again, the longest out of all four of these brushes. The Z1 is next to it, and this one has a round ferrule, and it has an overall length of 160 millimeters and a 45 millimeter bristle length. The Z8 also has a round ferrule, and it's 160 millimeters, so the same length as the Z1, and it's 40 millimeters bristle length. And then we have the Z4, which has a round flat ferrule, and it is 150 millimeters total length and 35 to 38 millimeters bristle length. The base of the ferrules also differ in width. So with the Z9, we have a ferrule width of 25 millimeters and a hair thickness of 20 millimeters. So the ferrule is going to be 25 millimeters for this, and then the bristles themselves are 25 millimeters thick. For the Z1, we have a ferrule width of 25 millimeters, and then the hair width again is going to be 20 millimeters. Then for the Z9, we have a ferrule width now of only 23 millimeters, and the hair thickness, so the hair width, is going to be 18 millimeters. And then finally for the Z4, we have a ferrule width of 18 millimeters and a hair width or hair thickness of 12 millimeters. The ferrule width is measured at the top of the ferrule where it opens to meet the bristles. So this is approximately 25 millimeters is what the measurement is given, and using this caliper, I'm getting around that length depending on where you measure it, because there is a little bit of a lip to this ferrule which will cause a difference in the width. And then the bristle width is measured at the base of the bristles. So the measurement is taken right where the bristles meet the ferrule. And for this one, it's about 23 millimeters, and I think that's what it says. And the length of the bristles would be given from base of the bristles to the top of the longest bristles. And this is supposed to be 45 millimeters length. And you can see it's just about right. This is actually a calibrated instrument, so yeah. And if you compare the Z9 ferrule width and the Z1 ferrule width, they're the same at 25 millimeters. So the ferrule widths are the same, and the hair thickness or the hair width is also the same at 20 millimeters. However, the Z1 has a round shape and the Z9 has an oval shape. So you'll see that the shape of the ferrule does affect the overall size and profile of the brush itself. Remember now, the Z9 has longer bristles as well. So you'll see the longer bristles does give you a fluffier and wider width at the top of the brush, even though the ferrule width and the hair thickness or the hair width is the same for both these brushes. And if you compare the Z1 up against the Z8, you can see what a difference the ferrule width will make. So the Z1 has a 25mm ferrule width, while the Z8 has a 20mm ferrule width. So you'll see how much of a difference that makes. Those 5mm makes a difference in the overall size of the brush. And then the bristle length for the Z1 is 45mm versus 40mm for the Z8. So you can see the difference in size for these two brushes. And the size and detail says they should be the same overall length. So the handle on the Z8 is a little bit longer to compensate for the difference in the bristle length. Now between the Z4 and the Z8, we have a difference of length of about 10mm. So the Z4 is definitely going to be a smaller overall brush, and you can see the difference in the overall length. The bristles are 40mm on the Z8 and 35 to 38 on the Z4. So if you put them right up next to each other, there's just a slight difference between the bristle lengths. The width of the ferrule, as you can see, is different for both brushes. So for the Z8, we have a 20mm ferrule versus the 18mm ferrule for the Z4, and you can see the difference there. And again, that results in a smaller brush head. These are both round flat designs, so they're a little bit pinched to give you that oval shape. So there you can see the difference a couple of millimeters can make to an overall brush shape and size. So hopefully going through those dimensions and measurements give you a better idea of how brushes stack up against each other when it comes to overall brush length, overall bristle length, ferrule width versus bristle width, and that can help you make a better decision when it comes to deciding which brushes you want in your collection based on your needs and preferences. Alright guys, hopefully this video was helpful and now you're a little bit more knowledgeable, you feel a little bit more comfortable with the size and information that you may see on different websites when you're shopping around for Fude brushes. And this can't be left unsaid. Fude is very, very personal. It's very specific based on how you like to apply your makeup, what kind of products you use. It's very specific to each individual. So you're going to have to navigate your way around brushes and figure out what works best for you. And I suggest trying out cheaper alternatives from like e.l.f. or Sonia Kashuk or Wet n Wild. Try out cheaper brushes to see if you like the shape of the brush heads, to see if you like the length of the handles, the density, so you can kind of figure out what you are interested in, like what intrigues you before you jump the gun and invest in these really pricey brushes, because they are pricey. Now I have a Fude playlist that I keep adding to, and I have hauls over there where I show you different brushes so you can get an idea of the different shapes that are out there, because I went ahead and grabbed so many that you can see through me what different brushes look like and how they kind of look size-wise next to my face, and you can use that as a bit of a guide to determine what brushes can also work well for you. So hopefully this was helpful. I will go ahead and leave links to the websites that I use to shop for my Fude, and you can shop through those. Those are the websites that I recommend. The number one would be CDJAPAN, but there are other websites that I've also shopped through that I've had a great experience. I just think CDJAPAN is the best one. If you want a local website, you have Hakuhodo USA. Hakuhodo is one of the best known Fude brands, and then you also have BEAUTYLISH. They carry Chikohodo and Koyudo and a few other brush brands. I recommend Sonia G from that website because they're the only website that carries that, and that's why I still shop from them. But we're not gonna get into that right now. So again, hopefully this video was helpful. I know it was long, but hopefully you still got some information from this. And I have tons more videos coming up about Fude because, like I said, my love has grown and I want to share my experience, my knowledge, and my love of Fude with you guys. So hopefully you stay around for the journey, and until my next video, which will be very soon, I'll talk to you. Bye guys.